Great, and we started the recording. We are starting our contributor technical discussion for March 5th. So it looks like we're starting with a couple of demos, one for GNoKMS and then one for Conway's Game of Life. Do we want to go ahead and start top to bottom? Start with GNoKMS?
Yep.
Sounds great. I'll go ahead and stop presenting and I can hand over the screen to you.
Okay, thank you. Up, let me just share my terminal. Okay, everyone can see it.
Yep.
Okay, so okay, just to give you a little bit of context, the tool I'm going to present is still work in progress, and the goal is just to show you the current version and get your feedback, basically. But since the tool is related to sensitive part of the project, things might change after GA and Manfred review. So currently, to sign votes and proposal, a Gnoland validator node use a signing key, which is stored in plain text in a file. So, okay, this folder is empty. If I just init a new node data by using the lazy command. As you can see, the secret of the node, so the validator signing key is stored here. So you have the private key and everything related to it, and yeah, by default. This is the validator in your Genesis file generated by the lazy command. And the purpose of the tool of GnoKMS is basically to provide a more secure way to manage your key. So how it works, basically GnoKMS is just a server that provides multiple backends. So the only implemented right now is a Gnokey local instance. So you can just use your key added to Gnokey. But we plan to add more backend like cloud-based or HSM backend. So yeah, and we can extend it in we want. The way it works is the Gnoland validator will connect to the GNoKMS server using a Unix socket connection if it's on the same machine, or a TCP connection if it's a remote connection. And just so you know, the TCP connection can be mutually authenticated to add another layer of security. But we will see that after. So what I need first to use GNoKMS is to basically have a key registered in Gnokey. So for the demo, I added the test1 key in my local Gnokey instance. Then we can just start a GNoKMS server using, so I will just show you the subcommand, and we can start a GNoKMS instance using the Gnokey backend with our test1 key. I don't set any password. So, okay, right now the server started, and as you can see, you have the validator info that you can add to your Genesis file. So the Genesis file will be aware of your signing key used by your remote signer validator. And you can also see that GNoKMS is currently listening on the default listener, which is this one. So I will first need to add my Gnokey signing key in the Genesis file. So let's just remove everything. Then I will generate, an empty Genesis file. I will also add the default balance to it. So right now we have just a Genesis without any validator. And I will add my GNoKMS signing key. So basically that's the same thing. The GNoKMS by default, it provides you the Genesis format. It outputs the Genesis format of the key you selected and also the base32 format if you need to use the GnoJS command, sorry. So basically this is the base32 address and the base32 pub keys, and you can add any name and any power you want. Okay, so now my Genesis file is ready. Then I will need to init, my secret and my config again. So this command just creates a new Gnoland data directory. And I will need to add this address in my validator config. So the validator is able to connect to GNoKMS to remote sign its request. Let me just show you in this config, we can see there is a new section. Okay, so this new section is dedicated to the remote signer. So you have a bunch of network property, and among them you have this server address field. If it's empty, it will still use the plain text file. But if we set the GNoKMS address, it will use the server as a remote signer. And we can just start, I think, the node. And if everything is set up correctly, it will connect. Then it will start sign a block using GNoKMS. So we can see this node is a validator, with basically the address of my test1 key set up in Gnokey. Sorry, I have a question. Someone raised his hand. Oh, okay, it was reaction. No problem. So that's the basic setup if you just want to do stuff for developing. But if you want to use mutual authentication, it's pretty simple. You will need to use the auth subcommand in GNoKMS, and to first generate a Gnokey file, which will basically store both your private key for GNoKMS and the list of authorized key for the validators that can connect to GNoKMS. Once this is done, you can just note the identity key of GNoKMS. I can copy it, then add it to the config of my node. So in the field remote signer TCP authorized key, So now, basically, GNoKMS will authenticate with the validator on each connection. If the public key of GNoKMS is not in the TCP authorized key of the validator will close the connection, basically. And if you also want to authenticate the validator in GNoKMS, you can do basically the same thing. You just need to get, it's a secret. You just need to get the pub key of your node key using this command, and you can add it. GNoKMS out add. Oh, sorry. I know why I don't have this. GNoKMS authorized add. Yeah. And I need to remove this and to add my key. Okay. And now I have my node, my validator node key in the authorized list of GNoKMS. So the first time I started GNoKMS, you can see this security warning, warning you that you don't use mutual authentication. And now if I start GNoKMS, I won't have this warning anymore, as you can see. And normally, if I don't suffer the demo effect, you will be able to connect. And no, I will suffer the demo effect. Pub key request failed. I don't know what I did, but unauthorized remote public key. What did I do wrong? Yeah, I probably copy paste the wrong key, but that's okay. I won't take it. I won't take much of your time, but you get the idea.
Well, now
And
we
that's it for me.
know the auth is working, so that's good.
Yeah, you can see that it won't accept an unauthorized key. So yeah, that was for the demo actually. Thank you, Nathan.
That's great. This is really exciting. I think that it seems like a sensible abstraction, and being able to support, the cloud vendor KMS stuff, and then also HSM would be really awesome from an operation and OPSEC standpoint. Cool. Any other questions anybody want to bring up on that after that demo? Okay.
Just wanted to know for Ilker, because I see he's on the call. After we merge this, I think I'm pretty sure you can use your ledger for the validator key, so you can have something on premises for a validator for Gno.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
basically the Gnokey adapter is pretty simple, and just basically pipe any of your Gnokey request to the like the actual Gnokey implementation. So you can use all the ledger and everything you have in Gnokey in GNoKMS. And yeah.
Do we have like any like news about the key rotation for the validator? Like, I think it's not something we have right now, right? And yeah, something that we should definitely work on at some point.
At some point, we will have key rotations and session accounts, account sessions. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe after the launch, this could be one of the priorities. Yeah.
It could be post-launch.
Yeah. Right. Nice. Thanks.
Very cool. Well, great. We'll keep the agenda going. Next is Conway's Game of Life presentation from Kirk.
Okay, dokie. Yeah, so what does this have to do with Gnoland? Conway's Game of Life is a cellular automaton that was devised by a British mathematician in 1970. And just to give you a quick background on it, basically the idea is that if you start with some initial state on a board that's composed of a bunch of cells, and you apply a simple set of rules to each generation of that board, the state will evolve. And at any particular generation, the state is deterministic based upon the initial configuration of the board. And so this particular game of life kind of simulates evolution of a whole bunch of like biological cells using a few simple rules. Any cell that has fewer than 2 neighbors dies from underpopulation. Any cell that has more than 3 neighbors dies from overpopulation. And any cell that has 2 or 3 neighbors continues to live. Any empty space that has exactly 3 neighbors will come alive. And so my idea here was, what if I built a simple DAP demonstrator that didn't depend on anybody having any knowledge of complicated, relatively complicated blockchain concepts. They didn't have to understand wallets or accounts or keys or anything else. So the idea was to build a simple realm that can do all of the calculations from one generation to the next for a board just using a render function, and then build the UI in JavaScript and communicate between the UI and Gnoland with the GnoJS client. And so that's what we have here. And this is actually running. You can see the URL. Oh, maybe you can't see the URL. I'll paste the URL into the chat here in a minute. Right now, the UI is running off of a GitHub Pages account, off of a personal repo of mine, but I'm going to move this all into Noverse today. So it'll all be accessible there, and you'll be able to find the URL under Game of Life in Noverse. But let me just demo it really quickly. Right now, I have a board that is 130 cells wide by 50 cells tall. It's a pretty big board, actually. And we can step through a generation at a time. And you can see it's evolving. Or we can just say, start going and just go. And so what's happening here is that each time this evolves, all of the calculations are happening on Gnoland via a realm and a render function. It takes the state of the board and it serializes it all essentially into a string that it submits to the render function. The render function unpacks it all, does all the calculations, and then packs up another string that gets returned, that gets re-rendered into this board. And so we have a really simple DApp. Anybody can access it from any browser, and it interacts with Gnoland just transparently. And this will run continuously until the board reaches a steady state, if it ever does. Sometimes these boards reach a state where nothing is changing anymore, and if it reaches that state, and this is also something that happens occasionally. I don't have any error handling in it, and so if something happens in the communications with Gnoland, yeah, I need to add some error handling. But if something happens in the communications, we get an error, and then we can reset it. But yeah, so the UI needs a little bit of love. There's a couple bugs still in it. It doesn't have any error handling for things like that. But it'll just continue running. If we go with a smaller board, let's say 20 by 20, which is actually the default size here that I have for this, and we run it, you can see it calculates a whole lot faster. And this might reach a steady state here in a few generations. But yeah, that's the demo.
So are you representing a 2D matrix through URL parameters? Is that how?
No. So what's happening is the 2D matrix just gets rendered into a string and passed as an argument to render.
That's cool. So does it, if it's like a 20 by 20, is it basically just a list of zeros and ones on the state of each one of those cells? Or
kind of, yes.
Okay.
Any character is live, because you can see that, like, cell characters, I put Gnoland in here, but you can, you can add whatever you want, and then in the cells that are generated, it randomly selects from those cell characters. So you actually can have cells of different types in here, and as it evolves, some of them will persist, some of them will die off. And so in the string, anything that is not a space is a live cell. And it actually, because we're dealing with strings for render arguments, I'm using new lines in order to separate the lines, and then I parse it all back out, in the render function.
Neat. Thank you.
Yeah, there's some input massaging that happens when you pass data into render. So things like new lines actually get turned into literal \n's. And so, there's some limitations into what kind of raw data you can send and how you receive it and parse it out. But once you figure that out, it works pretty easily.
Someone had a question?
Oh, yeah, Antoine.
Yeah, congrats. It looks really cool. I have two questions. Where do you host your UI? And the second one is there any way to interact with it using GnoWeb? I mean, just not by using the help page and everything, but do you have a render function that renders something on GnoWeb?
So I have here, I'll paste the URL for where I have it currently. It's just on a GitHub pages right now. And like I said, I will move it into Noverse and set it up there, but that's where it's at right now. And yeah, right now, I suppose you could interact manually with the render function, but it's really, I set it up intending that it would only be machine interaction with it. And so, it's, you could manually pass in a board and get back the response, but it wouldn't be very interesting. Yeah, Jeff? Jeff, you raised your hand?
Sorry, I was muted. As I understand, you pass the entire state in each call to render, and the realm is not storing any data. Is that right?
Correct.
So two questions. Do you, at some point, if it's too big, the VM will time out and not process it. Do you know how big that is? And secondly, it seems like this is the kind of thing which is actually going to be blocked in the future. At some point, Gnoland is not going to support free computation on the blockchain.
Yeah. So see so I don't know how big the board has to be before it times out. The one that I was running at 130 by 50, is a pretty big board. And barring that network error that occurred, it renders pretty quickly. And yeah, that is one of the I guess the interesting things about Gnoland now versus future Gnoland is that, yeah, right now something like this works very simply, and there's obviously ways that this can be abused, but it's kind of an interesting use case to nonetheless to be able to do something like this. I think that it brings up some interesting questions though regarding ways to make functionality that is fundamentally read-only easier to use with Gnoland.
You could have a realm which is a JavaScript interpreter, right? And then you can just use Gnoland for free computation of arbitrary functions.
Right.
I assume that this is going to be blocked at some point.
Yeah, and see that's the interesting thing is yeah, you could definitely abuse this, but there's also like, you know, a conversation I think to be had about how to without that potential for abuse support things that are essentially read only, but that have utility and that sort of thing. This is just sort of a tech explorer here, but kind of a fun little tech explorer.
I wonder if you can have a realm which computes Bitcoin hashes. People would definitely abuse that. Well, this is obviously cool and obviously demonstrates how easy it is to write blockchain apps, you know, but it also may indicate something which won't be supported in the future.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, or which would be supported in a totally different way. Yeah,
or with
totally.
A little gas, just a little love. Give Gnoland a little love.
Well, I mean, one thing that would be interesting is some sort of a reverse gas model where the realm could be the one that has gas, and as long as the realm is funded, it can run.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be funded indirectly.
Yeah, because then you could have an application where the users don't have to worry about initiating transactions and dealing with all of that. All they do is interact with an app. But you know, there's some administration behind them that ensures that everything has enough gas to run.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like almost like a free tier where there's like a limited, like a constrained amount of gas and computational time stuff that can render, you know, for free, and then you'd have to fund more complex renders.
Yeah, but that would be an interesting model because then you could have all sorts of applications where the actual users don't have to know anything about wallets or anything else. They're just using an app, and then it's an app that happens to run using Gnoland. But anyway, yeah, that's my demo for today. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Kirk. I think these kind of philosophical explorations of the boundaries are important because if you didn't make it, someone would at some point. And so these are interesting to see. Well, cool. This finishes up the demos. So let me make sure I pull up the right screen. We have a couple of discussion items, and I guess we'll let folks lead discussions that are assigned to it. So I guess Norman, do you want to talk about standard libs in Genesis?
Sure. So there's one little question. The second one, should we put the testing lib in Genesis? Currently, it's not really possible because it imports FMT, encoding JSON and stuff like that. So I don't know, do we want that or do we want to keep it out of maybe for context, I have a task for Morgan to put standard libraries in the Genesis as add package TXs instead of currently how they're loaded. And so the question are around this topic. So first thing, should we put the testing lib also? And the more important philosophical one is I think Manfred wanted the promise that a package path uniquely identifies a package across chains, and having this package treated, this stdlibs treated as normal packages breaks this promise of normal packages. So I don't know how to proceed with that. Yeah.
I'll answer the first question because it's easier to answer.
Morgan, we'll answer the first question, but I can't hear anything else that you're saying.
What was the question, or what were the questions?
Sorry, my connection just dropped, so I didn't hear Morgan's answer. So the question for you, Manfred, I think, well, you can chime on it, is that treating stdlibs as regular packages breaks the promise you wanted of uniquely identifying packages by their path across chains if we treat them as normal packages.
So what you name stdlibs are things without like Gnoland inside, like
Yeah.
I don't know, math, for instance. Okay. No, it won't break stdlibs to be so. Regarding, let's think about packages in general. We will have non-stdlib packages that will work across chains in the future. How? By having basically a way to retrieve a dependency sources. So if you are on Gno.land and you have Gno.land /r/home, so you have the realm, importing Gnoland p-demo AVL. So another domain name. The goal is to expect to have this dependency provided in some ways. The official dynamic way will be something like ABC. So you can expect some mechanism so that you can fetch a remote source securely. Another one will just be to have the same source in your Genesis. So I think this is basically what you are doing right now with stdlibs in the Genesis. Consider that at the end, what we expect is for each identifier, could be Gnoland p-demo AVL, to make sure whatever is the way, so could be through Genesis, through whatever, to make sure that this package has the exact same content everywhere in the world. There is no way to have Gnoland p-demo AVL to be different on a chain or another. So the cool thing is, if ever you, Norman.land, make a bad Genesis, it's your problem. Because if me, Manfred.land, wants to get p-demo AVL, I won't ask Norman.land, I will ask Gnoland. So at the end, you can fuck up your blockchain if you want, that's your problem. You just expect that, oh, I have a missing dependency, I see the domain, Gnoland, Norman.land, Manfred.land, whatever. This domain is referenced in a new realm, which will be RSys zones. In RSys zones, we can have a mapping between official chains and their IBC and RPC endpoints. So you can expect to launch a new chain, Manfred.land, and get some dependencies from other chains. So I think stdlibs, I don't know what you are doing exactly, but I imagine that you are basically simulating that we were uploading like standard libraries as normal packages. Basically, that's okay. The worst that can happen is to have different versions from a chain to another. And this is something we expect new chains to be serious. If you want one chain to be compatible with other chains, make sure to be compatible, make sure to have the same piece of software. You should have a compatible GnoVM version, a compatible TM2 version, a compatible set of stdlibs. So Genesis becomes something people need to take care of, and that's all. We can expect basically good players to make compatible chains and people trying to make strange things to have problems.
So what you're saying is that if we want to upgrade stdlibs, for example, we need all chains to synchronously.
No, it means that basically we will have a compatibility matrix. This compatibility matrix will contain all GnoVM React. So if at some point we have GnoVM v1 and GnoVM v2, or GnoVM v1.1, and we have some compatibility differences, this is the same as having a different stdlib. So in terms of versioning, we will try to make compatible network of chains. And when the chains won't be compatible, we will figure out a way to either have independent sub-ecosystems, or maybe to have like a way to explain the differences, or maybe to have migration policies or whatever. But what you can expect is kind of generations of stdlib and GnoVM. What I expect is that we won't just update GnoVM because we want to update GnoVM for a simple thing or because stdlib is outdated. I expect the next GnoVM update, the GnoVM v2, or the GnoVM in another language or whatever, to be really different. Not just about dumping dependencies. But it can happen. It's not possible for us to make a long-term project like this and stay with the current version for the next 100 years. We will have at some point to manage multiple versions. And what we cross our finger is to try to have Gnoland, like the GitHub of the GNU ecosystem, to, if possible, still be as useful as possible in terms of providing good dependencies for your projects. So ideally, what we should expect is that the next generation of GnoVM software will at least understand what was GnoVM v1 code. This is basically a kind of a good compromise, in my opinion, in terms of retrocompatibility. I think one of the obvious examples is when we will support generics. Probably Gnoland won't support generics. There will be a question, do we want to make Gnoland upgrading so they can support generics too? Or do we want that only new chains support generics and that's fine because they can import Gnoland packages? But the problem is that now you cannot upload generics-based good piece of software. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll have a Gno.land and v2.Gno.land, so official chains maintained by the same set of GovDAO, but maybe with different GnoVM versions. I cannot say right now, but basically consider the stdlib to be part of the versions. It's really linked with a piece of software running under the hood.
But so relating to this, do you still agree that we should have the standard libraries be added like as packages, or do you think like that the standard libraries essentially, if we were to modify them, it should be like an upgrade of the VM on chain, and so they shouldn't be considered part of the packages uploaded on chain?
I think the two solutions can work. We can also just start without putting them in the Genesis and making an upgrade that will use it. So it's fine that maybe the current GNoVM version considers that the stdlib is built in. The next one is more flexible. I don't have a strong opinion on this one. Just consider that we will have different kind of upgrades. Some upgrade will be a GovDAO vote that will just change the parameter. So basically, it will call a range changing some stored data. So nothing to get in terms of software. And some other updates will update the software, and some other updates will update not only the software but also the realms. We can expect to have, for instance, RC something to be something that we upgrade not through a standard system, but to consider RC is something without a private key. So RC upgrades are happening because we make a chain upgrade. So if you think about this, you can consider that some upgrades could also just, add a missing stdlib contract. Just imagine, even if we go to the Genesis-based stdlib contract, in practice, there is no private key with a good namespace. So one of the solutions is to have an exception. Maybe GovDAO can upload a new package or whatever, but maybe the simplest solution is just to expect that if we want to add the missing stdlib package, we just make the chain upgrade. So that's why I'm fine having stdlib in Genesis, but I think we just don't need it. I don't know exactly what would be the benefits of doing it. Maybe there are some in terms of being standard. But right now, I had in mind to just consider that we release Gnoland with GnoVM, with stdlib, so right now we have the example folder. I think we need to rename it. So we have a difference between system realms and example realms. Portaloop makes sense to have everything. Maybe the first chain will just make sense to have the system realms and not all the demos.
Jeff, otherwise I'll answer Manfred.
If there's a way to change the realms without it being an actual transaction, like you're saying, I assume there is there already a mechanism to synchronize that with all the validators so that they know that when they're validating a transaction, then, you know, at this point in time, now we are using the new firm of some standard package? I ask because, of course, this all has to be retroactively reproducible. This should, in theory, be able to possible to reproduce all the transactions from the genesis up to the current point in time, knowing exactly which code was run.
But the problem, because it's not a real transaction, I prefer not managing this real transaction because of all the security involved. I prefer making an upgrade right now and just administering stdlibs or eventually fixing an stdlib. In practice, it could be a transaction later, but it will be, I don't know, a very complex one because probably it will be right now we have a transaction about adding a new package, and we just check if it follows the namespace. What could be the rule for stdlib? It's so important, so much about breaking things. I think only GovDAO can do this. So basically, it's not a single transaction. It's someone proposing like a fake add package, something that we don't have right now. We just have add package. Then it's about making a GovDAO vote, and if the GovDAO vote pass, then we change the stdlib for everyone. It sounds like very complex. Maybe that's where we're going later. Right now, I think just reading the chain is what we will expect. So even if we have this kind of special transaction for stdlib, I think what we will expect is to like have a very basic migration simulating a special transaction, something that nobody can do with signature, something we can enforce to be played by validators when there is an upgrade. So having stdlibs built in the binary as we are doing today, or in binary, or just expecting to be in the file system, so the current situation is probably good enough and simple enough.
Yeah, I was sort of trying to think while we were talking, because like I sort of see like also relating to what Norman was saying on the original question of the testing package. On this front, I made an issue a short while ago, which I authored the how. Essentially, it's about like removing all these other libraries which we are not yet sure about, or we may want to change the API before publishing them, and so erring on the side of caution and launching the chain with the less standard libraries than there are even now currently. This is something that I put in as a task to be done ahead of the mainnet launch, possibly just right after we figure out the STD, like we do with the PR, we merge the PR for the STD split. Because I sort of see, we launch with a restricted subset, and then even just say a few months after we launch the chain, we have tested more standard library packages that we know are useful and we want, and we have used maybe even right now in examples, but we're unstable, and we start adding them. So I was thinking about how we could do this, and I'm sort of thinking like, we could have, instead of making them, I think we may want them as in Genesis, just not as a as a transaction, but as a, say, list of packages that are like a separate field in the Genesis.json file compared to the transactions, and then then we establish a way on chain upgrades to add new standard library packages, which we don't have to figure out right now. We can figure it out with the first upgrade, but essentially, like, to have, for if a change is just about adding new standard libraries, it's about having a JSON file with the new libraries, with the new sort of mem packages to be added on the new version. So you can still have what Jeff was talking about, say that you have a GNoVM that like if say the FMT package doesn't exist until version 5, it's able to replicate all transactions from the beginning that try to import FMT as failing, and then from version 5 it's working. So yeah, sorry, just thinking out loud. For what Norman was asking about, I'd say that right now, don't make an exception on the testing package, and I'll take care like later in the month to move it to the testing set libraries, so it can only be used locally and not on chain, which will be a bit of a bummer because this makes it impossible, well, basically impossible to use testing. Well, yeah, impossible to use testing helpers. Like to publish testing helpers on chain, but then I expect us to upload an on-chain version sometime in the next few months once we've stabilized the API. And for what we were discussing with Manfred, I'd say I'll make a review of the API you were doing, Norman, and also propose a way, like maybe to not have as a transaction, but to still have it as a in the Genesis, and then we can, like, I think right now it's only important to have an idea of how this could work for upgrades without figuring out the full details, and then we'll figure it out on the first way to upgrade the VM.
Cool. So for sensitivity of time, we have 10 minutes left. Do we want to table the rest of this discussion and then at least try to hit the PX indexer item?
Thanks, Nathan. So this one is quite straightforward. We'd just like to understand a bit better to make sure that we got it right. I think it's quite explanatory. We don't really understand the parameters of this method. So the question is straightforward. Is the gas price the price per unit of gas, and can we use it to determine? No. Okay.
No, I'm kidding. It gives you the average gas price for. If you don't specify anything, I think it's like the last 1,000 blocks or 100 blocks. But if you do specify, you can actually specify a range, I think, for it. And it's going to give you the average gas price for whatever range you gave it. So it's essentially the average fee for transactions on the Gno chain, right? And it's not really. It's like super misleading if you understand that the fee that you gotta set is actually for the entire transaction. It's not for a unit of gas. Just read like the issue that I sent over.
Okay.
It's gonna be.
So it's an I understand. Okay, so it's an average. Okay, it's not exact. So okay, you need to report it not to one transaction, but to the average from the past range. Okay, and this is how you can use it. Okay.
Yeah. So my suggestion would be. Trying to sound like normal. Take whatever this function gives you over like a range, for example, of 1,000 blocks, multiply that by 1.5, and then make sure that it fits into the ratio that we have for the chain, which is, I think it's like 0.001 UGNOP per gas. If you're asking what the hell is a gas ratio, just read the issue that I sent over. It's going to be much clearer. But this is essentially what Adina is doing, by the way. If you click on like an Adina transaction, it gives you like some options for like fast, slow, or medium. It has like a multiplier that it basically applies to the transaction based on this information that it gets from the indexer, and then it fits it into a ratio, and that's what it sends out.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so it's okay. Got it. Okay. We'll dig. Thanks, Miloš.
Okay, excellent. Last item is OneBlock. It looks like they had a security audit and report, but they couldn't make the call today. So I think this is just mostly for reference, but looks like this will be worth taking a look at by folks. Cool. We have 7 minutes left. Do we want to go back to discussing the standard libs in Genesis, or is this something that we feel like is a good place to wrap up for today?
I think we're good.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, maybe enjoy the downtime between now and your next meeting, and thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.